Why, hello there, everyone. Once again, it is Game of the Year voting time. This marks the third year in a row in which I've done a video for this event. I just think these are fun videos to make. I don't even particularly care what the results are. I've already seen the nominee list for Game of the Year, and I've also seen the nominee list for the best role-playing Game of the Year. I have not seen the nominee lists for any of the other categories, so for all those other categories, I'm basically giving my blind reaction here. So I'm already signed in with my Twitter account, even though for some reason the image isn't loading here. The past couple of days, a whole bunch of things just aren't working on the internet for me. Anyways, start voting. So like I said, I've already seen the Game of the Year nominee list. I think this makes a lot of sense, right? Just in terms of the big releases this year. I think the most surprising thing would be It Takes Two being here. I guess Psychonauts 2 and It Takes Two are the two surprising things here, right? I'm really glad that a game such as It Takes Two is on here. It's at an inherent disadvantage, though, just because realistically speaking, anybody that's played this game would be people that had someone else that they were able to play it with, right? Because that's the intended way to play it. And so that automatically creates a selection bias in who's playing it, right? So pretty much anybody is able to play these. Actually, Ratchet & Clank also has an inherent disadvantage because that's a PS5 exclusive, right? And not many people have PS5s. The PS4 and the Switch install base is way bigger, so immediately, It Takes Two and Ratchet & Clank, those are the two that are at a disadvantage. I don't predict either of these will win just because of that. By the way, also, I'm going to give my reason for what I vote on, but I also just like predicting what I think is going to win, even if that is not necessarily the thing that I am voting on. So yeah, Ratchet & Clank might be the greatest game of the year, but I don't know, and not many other people know just because of the PS5's relatively small install base, and It Takes Two, that also has filtered out its potential audience just because of it inherently being a co-op game, a couch co-op game, right? So that would leave Deathloop, Metroid Dread, Psychonauts, and Resident Evil. I'm pretty happy to see Psychonauts on here as well, just because it's a 3D platformer, and those are not very common these days, right? It's weird to think that 3D platformers used to be the main shovelware genre, right? And then somewhere along the line, they've just become such a niche thing. But anyways, even though I don't think Metroid Dread is Game of the Year material, I'm going to vote on it, and I also predict it to win just because I think it's going to come down between Metroid Dread and Resident Evil, right? But the reason why I think Metroid Dread is going to win is just because it's been so long since we've had a Metroid game that a Metroid game releasing is a much bigger deal than yet another Resident Evil game, right? Because Capcom's been kind of milking the Resident Evil cow a lot lately. Not to say the game's bad or anything, but it's just much less of a big deal in terms of the industry, right? Like I said, I don't think Metroid Dread is necessarily Game of the Year material for me personally. I have a lot of critiques with it, even though I really do like it as a speedrun game. I think it's a great speed game, but critically as a video game, I think in my other video I said I would give it like an 8 out of 10 or something like that. I do have a lot of critiques with it, but I'm just going to go ahead and vote it because out of the things here, this is what I would vote. Personally speaking, independent of this nominee list, my personal Game of the Year is Shin Megami Tensei 5. But unfortunately, that only recently came out. So I'm assuming that's why it's not on the Game of the Year list, right? I haven't even beaten Shin Megami Tensei 5 yet, right? Because it just came out and it's a long game. It's a JRPG. But I can already tell that Shin Megami Tensei 5 is going to end up being my Game of the Year. So personal Game of the Year, SMT 5. The Game of the Year I'm actually voting on, Metroid. Also, though, I really do hope, it already did do well. Metroid Dread did sell well. I hope Metroid Dread keeps getting press, so that way maybe eventually Capcom will realize that they themselves could also maybe put some budget into one of their 2D action platformers. Mega Man X9. Because they've sort of they've sort of demoted Mega Man to this low-budget niche thing when Mega Man used to be one of their biggest IPs, and I would argue it still is one of their biggest IPs, just in terms of audience memory, right? Mega Man 11 was on a shoestring budget. Metroid Dread, on the other hand, actually had an obviously significant budget, and it ended up selling well. So I'm hoping that this shows not only Capcom, but other developers, or publishers, I should say. I hope that this ends up showing other publishers, including Capcom, that 2D action platformers definitely can sell well if you put a good budget into it. So anyways, that is those are my Game of the Year thoughts. Let's move on to the next category. Best Game Direction. Oh yeah, Returnal. I'm really surprised Returnal was not... Oh, you know what? You know what else should have been on? Well, I don't know. Something else that I was considering might have possibly been on Game of the Year was No More Heroes 3. That is a super niche thing, though, so I can kind of see why it's not on there. But if No More Heroes 3 was not on Game of the Year... If No More Heroes 3 was not on the Game of the Year list, then I think it should have definitely been in the Best Game Direction list, because even though... Again, I have a lot of critiques with No More Heroes 3. In terms of the direction, it's pretty great. So I really wish No More Heroes 3 was on here. I wonder if No More Heroes 3 is going to show up anywhere on this list. I think it should show up somewhere, definitely, right? It's weird that this category has so much overlap with Game of the Year. Right? Like, they could have replaced... Literally, the only difference here is Returnal instead of Metroid. I think they should have replaced one of these with No More Heroes 3. Again, Returnal might win this, but again, not many people have a PS5. I'm going to vote Psychonauts 2, not that I've played it, but just because... in terms of direction, that's something you can definitely tell even without playing it, because I'm looking at the game and it obviously has a really great art direction and just stylistic direction overall, right? I'm not just voting on my favorite game in each list. I'm actually considering the category and using that to influence my voting decision, right? As I think most people should, even though inevitably a lot of people are just going to constantly pick their favorite game in any given list. That's not how I like voting on these things. Next category. Narrative. Man, I have not played many games this year, and whenever I think back, trying to figure out why, I realize it's because Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection took so long to beat, because I did everything there is to do in Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection. I got the true ending, right? And I played the whole game on the hardest difficulty, and then I had to play the New Game Plus, essentially, on the hardest difficulty as well. And I had to get all the hidden stuff and do all the Hellhole challenges to get the true ending and fight the secret final boss. And that took so long. And that game came out in March, right? And I only relatively recently finished it. So I think that's why I haven't played many games this year. Speaking of Ghosts and Goblins, I think that should definitely show up in a category somewhere here too. I'm going to be sorely disappointed if Ghosts and Goblins or No More Heroes 3 don't show up anywhere here. They should both be nominated for at least some kind of category. Anyways, my point is I haven't played Guardians of the Galaxy, but I was actually super surprised by the writing of it, because I was kind of expecting another Avengers flop, right? But I watched people live stream this game. What's funny is if you live stream the game, you have to turn on streamer mode, and it disables a lot of the licensed music in the game, and then it results in some really awkward moments where music is obviously supposed to be playing, but it isn't, because you have like this big scene ramping up, and you can tell that music's about to kick in, and then it's dead silent, and it's super awkward. Anyways, despite that, Guardians of the Galaxy really does have really good writing in it, which I was very surprised by. So I'm just going to vote that, because that's the one narrative here I'm the most familiar with. Art direction? Oh, okay, well, you know what? I would vote Psychonauts 2 here, but I already voted Psychonauts 2 for direction, so I'm going to say Kena, just because Again, I haven't played Kena. It's a PS5 exclusive, but that is probably one of the prettiest looking games I've ever seen. So I think that's honestly not a hard decision. Best art direction, literally just which one do you think looks the best, right? Score and music. Wow, I wish SMT5 was on here, right? Even though I haven't beaten SMT5 yet, all of the music I've heard from SMT5 so far is so good. Like, that's my favorite kind of music. It's so distorted and off-putting, but it somehow works, and it works so well with the setting of the game, and it's really moody. Yeah, I really wish SMT5 was on here. Little bit of a spoiler, SMT5 is on the best role-playing nominee list. So that means that SMT5 did, in fact, come out soon enough to make the Game of the Year list in some way, meaning that it should also be able to have been nominated for Best Music. So that's really disappointing. I really wanted to vote SMT5 Best Music. I don't really know why Guardians of the Galaxy is on here. I think that's kind of cheating, because Guardians of the Galaxy very much relies on its licensed music, just because that's part of the actual game, right? Like, in the game, Star-Lord is actually canonically listening to a lot of these licensed songs. So that is, I think that should not be here at all. I think SMT5 should be here instead of that. So with that said, I'm going to vote Near Replicant. Normally, I don't really like remakes being on the Game of the Year list. Like, well, when I say remake, I mean a one-to-one remake, right? Because the Resident Evil 2 remake, when that came out, that was sort of a different situation, because the Resident Evil 2 remake was essentially a different game, because it was changed in such a fundamental way, whereas Near Replicant is pretty much a one-to-one remake, right? So normally I wouldn't want to see a one-to-one remake like this on the list, but in terms of the music is actually a completely different story, right? Because the music in this was actually completely remade. I have gone back and listened to some of the music from the original Nier, and I think some of the changes they made to Replicant were kind of questionable, but even so, it's still one of the best pieces of music ever. Collections of music, I should say. I would say my favorite track is probably, I forgot the name of it, but when you're in the desert area and you fight the boss of the desert area, and it's this collection of cubes. That's probably my favorite song from the game. But obviously, Song of the Ancients is the one that's going to come to mind for most people. So anyway, Near Replicant, pretty easy vote for best music for me. Even though I wish SMT5 was on here. Best audio design. I think I'm going to skip this one, because this is something you need to have actually really played the games to understand. I think a lot of people misunderstand this category, right? Audio design is going to come down to sound effects, and not only sound effects, but how the game uses sound, right? And how it sort of gives the player information, or maybe selectively misleads the player, right? Especially in the case of horror games. I'm just going to vote Resident Evil Village, because usually horror games make better use of audio design than anything else. Performance. Are these all voices? Everyone's going to vote her just because of the character, even though it's not necessarily because of her performance. I'm going to say Giancarlo, just because he always fills his roles pretty well as a villain. Games for impact. I think a lot of people always misunderstand this category as well. These are all super artsy indie games. I guess Life is Strange isn't technically indie, but I have not played any of these, so I'm going to skip that one. Where is the next category button? Did it not load? Oh, I think that only pops up automatically if you vote. Okay, so just skip. Best ongoing. Final Fantasy XIV Online. This is the only game here that I've played. It's still going pretty strong. Pretty easy decision. Best indie. I would vote Demon Turf if that were on the list. If that were on the list. I keep forgetting Kina's an indie game. Yeah, I haven't played any of these, but I'm going to vote Kina just because, visually speaking, that is incredibly impressive for an indie game. I've been recommended Loop Hero, but I don't know. I feel like just watching gameplay of that game isn't enough to sell me. Maybe I do have to actually play it myself. I'm curious. I'm going to, after recording this, I'm going to go back and look at the indie games that came out this year, and I bet I'm going to see some indie games that I think should have been on here instead of these, right? Because a lot of indie games come out each year. Next category. Wait, did it actually save that? Yeah, it did. I didn't know if you had to hit this to save the vote or not. Best mobile game. That's a skip. What is that? I thought that was near something for a moment, but it's not. Community support. Recognizing a game for outstanding community support. So we're not voting based on the community that plays the game. We're voting based on the developers' support of the community that's playing the game. Yeah, that'll be another FF14. Easy. So this is another category that I think you can only really vote in if you've played everything on the list, right? Most of the time, people think of controls or things like that, but it can definitely be done in a more creative way. So yeah, again, I'm skipping this category. VR. I don't have a VR headset, but Resident Evil 4, if I were to get a VR, well, I know PlayStation VR is probably a much better decision than getting the Oculus, or whatever it's called. Resident Evil 4 is on, yeah, Oculus Studios, there it is. Resident Evil 4 is on Facebook's headset, or whatever it's called. And that's like the only significant game it has on there. So, like, if I were to get a VR headset, right, I'd want to get something that has a bit more games like the PlayStation VR. But just speaking in general, if I were to play any VR game, Resident Evil 4 VR is the one I would want to play on this list. So I'm going to vote that. And I think that'll probably end up winning just because Resident Evil 4 is an incredibly popular game, right? Next category. Best action game. Still need to play Chivalry 2. I don't think first-person shooters like Deathloop and Far Cry or even Back 4 Blood should be on action game. Man, every single year I completely disagree with the nominees for action game. I think they are giving the action genre, I think they're giving it not enough credit. The action genre is definitely its own thing, and first-person shooters should be categorized as a separate genre, in my opinion. Right, because they even say focus primarily on combat, so Chivalry would definitely be an action game. So I'm going to vote Chivalry here just because this is the only game on the list that I actually consider to be a pure action game and not just a shooter, right? I don't know if it'll win necessarily, though, because I don't know if people are thinking about that. I think most people are just voting on their favorite. Best action adventure. Don't know how many categories we have left. I'm really hoping Ghosts and Goblins shows up somewhere. I don't really consider Metroid Dread an action adventure, right? It's a 2D Metroidvania, and I don't consider Psychonauts an action adventure either because that's a platformer. So I don't think they understand this genre. Running combat with traversal and puzzle solving. Ratchet and Clank would probably be the closest thing to an actual action adventure here. Guardians of the Galaxy and Ratchet and Clank are the two action adventure games on here, really. Resident Evil is a survival horror. This is a platformer. That's a Metroidvania. And I already voted on Guardians of the Galaxy for narrative. So I'm going to vote Ratchet and Clank here. Best role-playing. Okay, so finally we are at best role-playing. Cyberpunk, that's not going to win for obvious reasons. They still had to include it though, right? Because it was one of the most anticipated games ever, and it obviously had a lot of budget, even though they might have not used that budget very well. So it should definitely be on here in some way. Monster Hunter Rise makes sense. Monster Hunter Rise coming out isn't really as big of a deal as when Monster Hunter World came out, though. But still, if a Monster Hunter game came out in the year, it has to be on the best role-playing list. Even though, really, now that I say it out loud, Monster Hunter is definitely more of like an action game. It does have RPG elements, obviously, right? It's an action RPG. It is an action RPG for sure, right? It's action and RPG. But because of that, I would have put Monster Hunter in the action category. Yeah, wow, that's so dumb that they had 3 first-person shooters in the action category, but not Monster Hunter, right? Because Monster Hunter is more of an action game than Deathloop is. And then if they moved Monster Hunter to the action games, it would have given another free slot. It would have left an open slot for some other game for best role-playing, right? If you're going to have a category exclusively for role-playing games, I think you should get the most RPG-y RPGs in here, right? Scarlet Nexus is also an action game. Why in the world was Scarlet Nexus not in Best Action Game? That's really dumb. Monster Hunter and Scarlet Nexus should have definitely been in Best Action Game. Maybe they couldn't think of other RPGs that came out this year, but I think there were other ones, so even if you have to get an indie RPG, just do that, right? It's still an RPG. Tales of Arise, that makes sense, right? One of the most long-running RPG franchises. It's still real-time combat, though. I think it's really weird that only one game on the best role-playing list is turn-based combat, so I was already going to give my vote to SMT5 anyway, because SMT5 is my personal game of the year, and I'm even more certain of it because this is the only turn-based game on this list, and I want to keep on representing turn-based combat because I hate this sort of neo-narrative that turn-based combat is somehow outdated when it's not. It's just a different medium. So yeah, SMT5 as the easiest vote I've made so far. Best fighting game. I have a lot to say about this one. So Guilty Gear Strive is probably going to win here. Not only because of it being the most popular. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl might be rivaling its popularity, but I think the meme culture surrounding it sort of misrepresents how niche this actually is. So, realistically speaking, Guilty Gear Strive is the most popular thing on here. But also, it has really good netcode. So I think that's automatically going to make Guilty Gear win the best fighting game. Even though I personally have a lot of complaints about the game and as such have not been playing it, right? Like, I've been playing Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. That is my fighting game of choice right now. They still have not fixed a lot of the things about Guilty Gear Strive that I wanted them to fix, so it's just obvious by now that their direction with the game is just not what I want. It's still a very good product, though, right? Excluding how terrible the lobbies are. So I think Guilty Gear Strive is going to win, even though I think Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl has a pretty good chance, because even if Guilty Gear did end up selling more than Nickelodeon and has a bigger player base, you have to remember, fighting games in general are still pretty niche. So most people voting in the Game of the Year polls here, most people voting and going to this category aren't even fighting game players. And so a non-fighting game player would probably vote on Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl because of the meme culture I mentioned, right? Not only that, but this is a Smash clone, which is way more accessible, right? So from a general audience perspective, I think most people are just going to click on Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. So I think it's actually really close between these two winning. What's kind of unfortunate is that Melty Blood also has really good netcode, apparently. It has rollback. I know it does have rollback. I don't know if it's as good as Guilty Gear Strives, but still, it's pretty decent rollback netcode, right? But Melty Blood is just so incredibly niche. That's never, that's not going to win. Is this even like a real fighting game, or is it an arena fighter? That's an arena fighter, I'm pretty sure. It's not like a traditional 2D fighting game. I would have known about it if... I would know if that game was a 2D fighter, right? Maybe that could win because Demon Slayer is incredibly popular as well, and because that's not an actual fighting game, maybe it has a bigger general audience. Personally, I'm going to vote on Virtua Fighter just because I really want that game to get a sequel, right? Like, I really want a new Virtua Fighter to rival the next Tekken, for example, right? As much as a lot of the YouTube audience thinks I want Virtua Fighter to fail for some reason, I really don't. Like, I would really want Virtua Fighter to get some recognition so they can make a fully new game. When I was making those Virtua Fighter videos, when I made that video saying how Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown was destined to fail, I obviously wasn't saying I wanted it to fail. I'm saying that Sega's kind of setting it up for failure, right? Literally, go look at the directory right now. That game has barely anyone playing it. Guilty Gear Strive is still going super strong, at least on Twitch, right? So exactly what I predicted came true, and I'm hoping despite that, they are still making a new one. So I'm going to vote this just so that way I can give some kind of recognition to Virtua Fighter in general, because I would like that franchise to come back. Best family. Man, I was really excited for Mario Party. I wasn't going to get it at launch. I was going to get it later. It's a okay, so for anyone that doesn't know, Mario Party Superstars is basically a remake of several Mario Parties before it. It includes remakes, just graphical remakes of a bunch of different mini games from Mario Parties of yore. So you'd expect it to be chock full of content, right? So you can imagine how disappointed I was when I found out that this game only has like 5 maps. It only has 5 boards. What? I don't know why Nintendo is being so cheap with that. It Takes Two is a couch co-op game, which I don't really consider to be a family game. Even though you can play that with a family member, obviously, right? But when I think of family game, I think of more than 2 players. Like Mario Party, for example, right? I'm going to vote WarioWare. Haven't played it yet. I was really wanting to get it at launch, but none of the stores nearby had it. And I didn't want to buy it digitally because this is a game that I actually want to have a physical copy of. So yeah, I actually did try to get that game, but it was sold out everywhere I checked in town. But I still would like to get that game. So that's a pretty easy vote from me. Next category. Best Sim Strategy. I've not played any of these. I'm going to skip that. Which is weird because I really like strategy games, but I guess not many have come out this year. Ooh, you know what game I am excited for? Octopath Traveler. That will probably be the best strategy game of next year. So next year, the best strategy category will definitely have a game that I am going to wholeheartedly vote on. Still kind of dumb they lump in sim with strategy, because Microsoft Flight Simulator has nothing to do with Age of Empires. That's really dumb. I say that every year. I have to say it again. Best sports/racing game. No arcade racers this year. I really like arcade racers, right? Like I used to play Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled a lot when it came out, and did a lot of those time trials. I really liked that. I guess Hot Wheels could technically be considered an arcade racer. I wouldn't really consider it an arcade racer in the way I think of arcade racers, though. I'm going to vote Riders Republic here just because Riders Republic is the only game here that tries to do something silly with the racing, right? Because you have people with this flying squirrel suits and people on the bikes. I have no idea. I honestly don't have much confidence that that game will be good, especially with it being Ubisoft. But like I said, I'm just voting on that because I want to show that I prefer racing games that aren't necessarily so realistic. Best multiplayer. Knockout City's on PS Plus. I should download that. It Takes Two. I got the game. I haven't played it yet. I'm waiting for my brother to have time to play it with me. He's busy with school stuff right now, so once he's done with that, he should have time to play it with me. But we played A Way Out, which was this game's predecessor. It Takes Two is essentially the spiritual successor to A Way Out. And we really liked A Way Out. So I'm very much looking forward to playing It Takes Two. And this is the only game on the list that I have any plan on playing. I'll probably eventually get Monster Hunter Rise on PC. I'm not feeling pressured to do it right now. Like, I don't feel like I have to go out and play Monster Hunter Rise right now, because Monster Hunter is always more of the same, which isn't a bad thing, right? That's what the franchise is. But in terms of the one I'm most excited to play, it's It Takes Two. Content Creator of the Year. Dream here is the only one I have any clue about. I don't want to vote on Dream, though, so I'm skipping. Debut indie. Oh, Sable's on here. I'm going to vote on Sable just because of the art style. Even though I would also see myself voting on Kina because of the art. But I already voted on Kina for something else, so I'm going to give Sable some recognition. Again, I'm surprised. Oh, Demon Turf couldn't be here because this is debut indie, so it's the first game of the studio. Wow, I need to look into Kina's development. That's their first game. How did they get it to look that good? That's crazy. But yeah, the creators of Demon Turf had already made Slime Song. Most anticipated game. Ooh, okay. I think we pretty much know what to expect from Horizon Forbidden West, right? We pretty much know what to expect from Elden Ring. It's basically open world Dark Souls. I know what to expect from Starfield. I think it'll just be like the Outer Worlds, but without the humor. If Outer Worlds 2 comes out around the same time as Starfield, Outer Worlds 2 is going to destroy this game. It'll probably still sell well, though, just because it is Bethesda. So the two here that I'm anticipating the most are God of War and Breath of the Wild 2. Even so, I think Breath of the Wild 2 is a bit more mysterious, because Nintendo always tries to inject some kind of new gimmick or something into their games. So I'm going to vote Breath of the Wild, even though I am looking forward to God of War as well. Like I said earlier, I'm also looking forward to Triangle Strategy, but that's pretty niche, so I guess that's why it's not here. Is this the last category? It would make sense if the most anticipated game would be the last category, since it's sort of talking about the future. Esports game. I'm going to always vote League of Legends here because I think it's the best esport on these lists, even though I definitely do not recommend anyone get into that game. Please don't play that game. Take care of yourself. Don't play League. Just esports athlete. I only really know League esports players. I wish it would say what game they play on here. Some of these might be League of Legends players, but I haven't followed League of Legends esports in a while. Also, I don't see any fighting game players. I guess it's just because it's niche. Yeah, I pretty much only follow fighting game esports, and I used to follow League of Legends esports. Anything else besides that, like, I'm assuming some of these are first-person shooter players, and that's why I don't know them. Esports team. Again, no fighting games, but of course, fighting games aren't team-based, so I'm just going to vote League. Sports coach. Cool, yeah, that was my vote. What is this? The International. Man, we couldn't have Evo here because Evo again this year was technically existent. Evo technically existed, but it was partially not existent, and the stuff that did exist was online, so I can see why Evo wasn't on here. It's just kind of lame seeing fighting games never get any recognition. But I'll vote League of Legends. And is that the last category? Okay, apparently it is. So, let me go back to the beginning to see if I can predict who's going to win on the things that I voted on already. the things that I didn't explicitly predict. Okay, yeah, I think Metroid Dread's going to win this. People are just going to pick their favorites for a lot of these categories. Psychonauts 2 or Kena have to win Best Art Direction, right? Although Deathloop does have some pretty cool art as well. Yeah, I really wish SMT5 was on here. I'm going to be pretty tilted if this wins Best Music, because that is cheating. A lot of these people are just going to vote on their favorites for this. I think FF14 will win Best Ongoing and Community Support. Best Indie, I don't know. Kena is the indie game that's the closest to being like a AAA game, so maybe. But I know a lot of people like Loop Hero as well. Resident Evil 4 will definitely win Best VR Game. Best Action Game, I hope Chivalry 2 wins just because it's the only action game. Although I think it has an okay chance. Best Action Adventure, I don't know on this one. I think, honestly, if Metroid Dread wins Game of the Year, the same people voting might also just vote for this in this category. I hope SMT5 wins this. I think it'll come down between SMT5 or... I was going to say Monster Hunter, but Tales of Arise actually sold really well. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw something around when Tales of Arise first came out saying that this was the best-selling Tales game in a long time for some reason. Yeah, this will be between Nickelodeon and Guilty Gear. This will be either Mario Party or... It'll probably just be Mario Party or... Yeah, this is just a port with some extra stuff. Wario is not popular enough to win. It's multiplayer. I could see this winning Best Multiplayer. Or Back 4 Blood. I know a lot of people liked playing the beta. Dream's obviously going to win that. So yeah, we're kind of back near the end now. Most anticipated game. I think most people are going to vote Elden Ring, especially because it's the Game Awards and it has Jeff Keighley, right? They just want to hear Jeff Keighley say Elden Ring. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what your personal picks were. Let me know what your Game of the Year is. Let me know what your pick is in the other categories, if there are any other categories that you particularly feel passionate about. And I will see you all later, so bye for now.